Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. It all started when my wife and I moved into our dream home in what seemed like the perfect suburban neighborhood. The house had everything we wanted: 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, and most importantly, a spacious backyard perfect for entertaining. We're both social people who love hosting gatherings, and we were excited to make memories in our new space. The first few months were great. We had a housewarming party, hosted a few casual weekend barbecues, and even organized a neighborhood potluck to meet our new neighbors. Everything seemed perfect until we received our first HOA violation notice. The letter claimed we were violating noise ordinances and had unauthorized gatherings exceeding the permitted number of guests. I was baffled. Our parties were always reasonable, ending well before quiet hours, and we'd never received any complaints from our immediate neighbors. In fact, we often invited them to join us. That's when we started noticing the drone. It was small, white, and would hover over our property during our gatherings. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe someone in the neighborhood had gotten into drone photography. But then I noticed a pattern. Every time we had more than 5 guests over, the drone would appear, circling our backyard like a mechanical vulture. I did some digging and discovered that our HOA president, a retired man with too much time on his hands, had recently purchased a drone for property inspection purposes. He claimed it was to monitor maintenance issues like roof damage or unauthorized landscaping changes, but it became increasingly clear that he was using it to spy on residents and enforce his own arbitrary rules. I'm an IT professional with a background in network security, so I started documenting everything. I set up cameras to record the drone's flight patterns, logged dates and times, and even used software to track its movements. I also researched local drone laws and FAA regulations extensively. The breaking point came during my wife's birthday party. We had about 15 friends over for a casual afternoon celebration. Nothing wild, just adults enjoying cake and conversation in our backyard. The drone showed up within 20 minutes, hovering closer than ever before. I could see our guests becoming uncomfortable, some even moving inside to avoid being watched. That's when I decided enough was enough. I had already filed multiple complaints with the HOA board and even sent a cease and desist letter through my lawyer, but they dismissed my concerns. They claimed they had the right to monitor common areas, conveniently ignoring the fact that my private backyard didn't qualify as one. I had prepared for this moment. Over the previous weeks, I had set up a completely legal countermeasure system. I didn't use any jammers or other illegal devices. Instead, I created a localized Wi-Fi network that operated on the same frequency as most consumer drones. When activated, it would create enough interference to make controlling the drone difficult within the immediate area of my property. The next time we had a gathering, I waited for the drone to make its appearance. Sure enough, it showed up right on schedule. I activated my system, and within seconds, the drone started wobbling erratically. The HOA president, who I could see standing at the end of our street with his controller, began to panic as he lost control. The drone didn't crash. I had made sure my system would only create enough interference to force it to initiate its return to home safety feature. But it was clearly struggling to maintain stability as it retreated. The look on the HOA president's face was priceless as his precious surveillance tool fled back to him like a scared puppy. The next day, I received another violation notice, this time accusing me of interfering with HOA security measures. I was ready for this. I had my lawyer send them a comprehensive package containing 1. Detailed logs of every drone flight over my property. 2. Citations of FAA regulations regarding drone usage in residential areas. 3. State and local privacy laws they were violating. 4. Footage from my security cameras showing the drone hovering over my private property. 5. Testimonials from neighbors who had also experienced drone surveillance. 6. A formal complaint about harassment and invasion of privacy. I also included a notice that I would be filing a formal complaint with the FAA about their unauthorized drone usage over private property, as well as pursuing legal action for harassment and privacy violations if the behavior continued. The response was swift. Within days, I received a letter from the HOA's lawyer acknowledging receipt of my documentation and assuring me that the drone program would be temporarily suspended pending review. They tried to maintain their dignity by not admitting wrongdoing, but we all knew what had happened. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Other residents started coming forward with their own stories of drone surveillance and HOA harassment. It turned out I wasn't the only one who had been targeted. The HOA president had been using the drone to monitor everything from children's birthday parties to garden layouts. The story might have ended there, but I decided to take it one step further. I organized a neighborhood meeting, in my backyard of course, to discuss HOA reform. The turnout was impressive. Almost 70% of homeowners attended. Many shared their own experiences with excessive HOA enforcement and overreach. We formed a committee to review and revise the HOA bylaws, focusing on privacy protection and reasonable enforcement measures. I was elected to the committee, along with several other homeowners who had experienced similar issues. The HOA president, sensing the shifting winds, chose not to run for re-election when his term ended 3 months later. The new HOA board, led by a younger, more reasonable president, implemented several changes. Clear guidelines for enforcement measures that explicitly prohibited surveillance of private property, a requirement for documented complaints from actual neighbors before violations could be issued, a formal appeals process for violation notices, regular open meetings where residents could voice concerns, reasonable updates to outdated rules about gatherings and property use. The drone. It was sold at the HOA TAS next budget meeting, with the funds going toward new playground equipment for the neighborhood park. A much better use of resources, in my opinion. These days, our backyard parties are drone-free, and the neighborhood is a more relaxed and friendly place. We still follow reasonable rules. We keep the noise down after hours and make sure our guests park considerately, but we're no longer living under constant surveillance. The best part? Last weekend, we hosted a neighborhood-wide barbecue. The new HOA president attended with his family, and we all had a good laugh about the drone incident. He even asked for my input on updating the neighborhood's security measures, focusing on common areas and community spaces rather than private properties. Looking back, I realized this experience taught me several valuable lessons. First, standing up for your rights doesn't always mean taking the most aggressive approach. By carefully documenting everything and working within the legal system, I was able to effect change without putting myself at risk or escalating the situation unnecessarily. Second, many people will support you if you take the lead in addressing shared concerns. What started as my personal issue with drone surveillance turned into a community-wide movement for HOA reform. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to take that first step. Third, technology can be a double-edged sword. The same devices that can be used to surveil and control can also be used to protect and defend our rights, when used properly and legally. Most importantly, I learned that positive change is possible when you approach problems strategically and build community support. Our neighborhood is now a model for other HOAs in the area, showing how reasonable rules and respect for privacy can create a better living environment for everyone. My wife and I still love hosting parties in our backyard. If anything, we entertain more often now that we don't have to worry about uninvited mechanical guests. Our gatherings have become a symbol of the positive changes in our community, a reminder that standing up for what's right, even in the face of intimidation, can lead to meaningful improvements for everyone. The drone incident, as we now call it, has become something of a neighborhood legend. New residents hear the story at community gatherings, usually accompanied by laughter and head shaking at the thought of such obvious overreach. It serves as a reminder of how things used to be and how far we've come. I sometimes catch myself looking up at the sky during our backyard parties, more out of habit than concern now. The only things flying overhead these days are birds and the occasional commercial aircraft. As it should be. Our property feels truly private again, and our home feels more like home than ever. The HOA still exists, of course, and it still serves its legitimate purpose of maintaining property values and community standards. But now it does so with respect for privacy and personal freedom, focusing on actual issues rather than petty rule enforcement. It's amazing how removing one overzealous president and his drone changed the entire dynamic of our neighborhood. I've had several neighbors ask me to teach them about privacy rights and technology, and I've even given a few informal presentations at community meetings about protecting yourself in the digital age. It's become a passion of mine, turning a negative experience into an opportunity to educate and empower others. My wife jokes that I should write a book called How to Fight Your HOA and Win, but I prefer to think of it as a story about community transformation. It's not about fighting against authority, it's about working together to create reasonable guidelines that benefit everyone. As for the former HOA president, he still lives in the neighborhood but keeps a much lower profile these days. I see him occasionally when I'm out walking our dog and we exchange polite nods. I like to think he learned something from the experience too, about the limits of authority and the importance of respecting privacy. The drone incident taught our community valuable lessons about privacy, technology, and the power of collective action. But perhaps most importantly, it showed us that positive change is possible when people stand together against unreasonable intrusion into their lives. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a backyard party to prepare for. No drones invited. Update. It's been 6 months since I shared my story, and a lot has happened. I wanted to give you all an update because things got even more interesting after the drone incident. Remember the former HOA president? Well, he tried to get revenge. He filed a civil lawsuit against me claiming my Wi-Fi interference system had damaged his drone and caused him emotional distress. He was asking for $25,000 in damages. I wasn't worried. I had documentation proving my system only created enough interference to trigger the drone's built-in safety features. Plus, his drone was perfectly fine. He'd been seen flying it in other neighborhoods. The lawsuit was just harassment. My lawyer was excellent. In the discovery phase, we requested all the drone's flight logs, maintenance records, and proof of FAA registration. Turns out the former president had never properly registered the drone for commercial use, which is required when using it for HOA business, and he'd been flying it beyond visual line of sight, another FAA violation. The judge wasn't happy. Not only did she dismiss his lawsuit, but she also ordered him to pay my legal fees. She said his lawsuit was frivolous and retaliatory. That was a good day, but here's where it gets better. The FAA got involved after receiving our complaint about the illegal drone usage. They conducted their own investigation and fined him $10,000 for multiple violations. They take this stuff seriously. The whole thing backfired on him so badly that he put his house up for sale last month. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he's moving to a condo in Florida. No HOA president position for him there. The condo board already rejected his application to join. Our new HOA is doing great. We've updated all the bylaws to be clear and reasonable. The focus is now on actual problems like fixing the aging playground equipment and improving drainage in the common areas. You know, things that actually matter. My Wi-Fi interference system, I've had several people ask me to help them set up similar systems. I always tell them the same thing. Know the laws, document everything, and only use legal methods to protect your privacy. I even started a blog about homeowner rights and dealing with HOA issues. It's gotten pretty popular. Last week, a local news station contacted me about doing a story on HOA overreach and privacy rights. I agreed to an interview, but only if they focused on solutions and positive changes, not just complaints. The segment aired yesterday, and my inbox is full of messages from other homeowners dealing with similar issues. Some lawyers reached out too, asking me to consult on similar cases. I'm thinking about it. There's clearly a need for people who understand both the technical and legal aspects of privacy protection. The best part, our neighborhood has become a model for HOA reform. 3 other nearby communities have used our new bylaws as a template for their own updates. The County Property Owners Association even invited me to speak at their annual meeting about modernizing HOA regulations. My wife says I've found my calling. Maybe she's right. This whole experience showed me how many people feel powerless against unreasonable HOA demands. But it also showed me that standing up for yourself the right way really works. Our backyard parties are bigger than ever. Last weekend we had 30 people over for a cookout. Kids were playing, music was playing at a reasonable volume, and everyone had a great time. No drones in sight. The former president's house goes on the market next week. Rumor has it that a young family is interested in buying it. They came to look at the house during our cookout and seemed really impressed with the neighborhood vibe. I made sure to tell them about our new, reasonable HOA policies. Looking back, I'm glad I handled things the way I did. It would have been easy to get angry and aggressive, or to back down and let them violate our privacy. Instead, I stayed calm, documented everything, and used the law to protect our rights. The drone incident could have just been a frustrating story about HOA abuse. Instead, it became a turning point for our whole community. It showed that one person standing up the right way can make real changes. So that's my update. If you're dealing with HOA issues, remember, document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Just make sure you do it legally and keep your cool. It works. Oh, and if you're wondering, yes, I'm hosting another party this weekend. Everyone's invited, except drones. They're still not welcome. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years, so I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month, and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road on the same day I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later, and I didn't bother answering. But through my window, I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already I wasn't digging the neighborhood. But I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house, so my gate was blocked more often than never, but a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week I was having a shower in my bathroom and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next door neighbor's water pump going. Now this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-storied house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything, and yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supply's pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious, but if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years this house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks. So it was chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So, I sat on it for a few days, thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week, and watering my garden, only cost like $5 per month, even with the neighbor also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was really simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s era wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services are grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalized, but they still have to pay the fines, and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now, the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring, and burned out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water, and I said, "Oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe and I turned it off till the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Y'all, the look on his face. He kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh, okay," and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and a neighbor who could potentially be a pain in the ass by simply flicking a tap off. Two birds, one stone, I'd say. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.